Hey yogis! So this week we talked about the second of the Niyamas, which is Santosha. And Santosha is the concept of contentment. It's really this idea of being comfortable, or at least being accepting of whatever it is the situation you find yourself in, whether it's good, bad, hot, cold. So in the spirit of Santosha, I decided to do this week's video from the ice bath. I just got back from the mountains, and I think the mountains have a lot to teach us about this concept of Santosha. If you think about a mountain, it's this grounded, deeply rooted, immovable presence, right? But on the surface of the mountain, there's a lot of turbulence, right? There's a lot of activity going on. There's storms that come, sun rises and sets. The seasons change on a mountain, right? But through it all, the mountain remains this deep, rooted, grounded presence, right? And in the same way, if we look at our lives, we often have a lot of turbulence on the surface of our lives, right? We have a lot of storms that come through. We can go through seasons of our own. But really deep down inside, we are actually this deeply grounded, rooted presence through it all, right? We always come out on the other end somehow. And so this idea of Santosha is really embodying the saying, like, this too shall pass, right? The good, the bad, all of it, right? It's just being here present in the moment. And I think there can be a lot of confusion around this concept. So here's a couple things that Santosha is not. Santosha does not mean standing by idly while some atrocity is happening. It doesn't mean, being okay with violence or harm, being done to you or those around you. It's not indifference, it's not nihilism, right? It also doesn't mean that you can't have goals for yourself, to work towards something. It's great to have aspirations and something that we're working towards. Really what it is it's more being completely accepting of whatever it is that's happening, so that, rather than wishing it were something different, so that we can be fully present, we can see our choices clearly, and we can do whatever it is the moment is requiring of us. But more often, I think what happens is we get stuck in a few pretty common traps. The first one is attachment, right? We have something that we like and we cling to it tightly, right? We grasp it. We get afraid to lose this thing. And we put a lot of energy into that fear, right? And sometimes so much so that we lose the opportunity to be present with whatever the thing is, right? We miss the opportunity of the present moment to enjoy this thing that we love because we're afraid of losing it, right? Or we get caught in the trap of aversion, right? We might see something coming our way that we don't want, right? And so we might spend a lot of energy worrying about that thing, or we might try to ignore it. When in reality, probably what we should do is just face it head on, right? So that we can do and be present with it, so that we can do whatever it is that the moment is asking us to do. Or we can also get pretty often caught in the trap of jealousy, right? We might see something that somebody else has, and we might want that for ourselves. And then we start playing this crazy game of comparison, right? And suddenly nothing in our life is good enough, and a lot of negative emotion is spent there. And the really ironic part is all of the energy that we pour into these negative emotions through these traps doesn't do anything to change the situation or help the situation that we're in, right? I like to think about it in terms of like a rain cloud, right? We might go out for a walk on a beautiful, bright, sunny day, and all of a sudden maybe a rain cloud appears over our heads and just starts drenching us, right? If we get upset about that, if we spend our time brooding and wishing that it wasn't raining, it doesn't do anything to change the fact that we're still getting rained upon, right? It's simply wasted energy. Instead, we could look at our options, right? We might think, okay, I better run and get shelter, or I better change my plans. Or we could say, hey, I'm gonna lift up my arms and wash my armpits and take advantage of this wonderful, beautiful shower that's happening on me. Or we might kick off our shoes and decide to sing and dance. But I have a fair amount of certainty that if we're busy being upset by the fact that it's raining, that those last two options didn't even come into our minds. And so, in effect, what happens is we may miss an opportunity, a beautiful opportunity that the present moment is providing us because we're too busy being worried, or we're being, wishing it were something different, right? So this is the idea of Santosha, of just being completely present. You don't necessarily have to like the situation you're in, but being present with it and accepting of it so that you can see your choices clearly and you can act accordingly. And of course, this can show up on our yoga mat like anything else on our physical asana practices. And there's a few things we can do to kind of help mitigate that, right? The first thing we can do is just be very accepting as much as possible, or at least conscious of thinking about accepting things as they are, rather than how we wish they were, right? Or how we think they could be, right? Especially with something like a physical asana practice. Our bodies change, right? They change over time, and they change day to day depending on what we've had to eat, how much sleep we've had, what's happened earlier that day. So we may be able to do a certain variation, maybe an advanced variation of an asana one day, and it might not be available to us another day, right? So rather than putting our time and attention on thinking, I should be able to do this, if we do that, we're robbing ourselves of the opportunity to give our body what it's asking of us that day and being present with ourselves in this moment, right? Another thing that can help is to really try to keep our attention within the four corners of our own yoga mats. I mean, it's a beautiful thing that we can come together as a sangha and practice our asanas together. But really, when we put our attention on our neighbors too much, what we're doing is we're taking the attention away from ourselves, right? And a lot of things can creep up there too, like comparisons, right? And a lot of sometimes negative energy can creep up in that as well. So just focusing on yourself while you're on your yoga mat can be helpful. And a really powerful tool also is gratitude, right? Just starting to have gratitude for what you can do and what you do have, right? And this can really help us cultivate more contentment, more Santosha in our lives. So this is just starting to talk about the concept of Santosha. I'd invite you to kind of think about this concept for the rest of the week and see how it creeps up in your own life. Next week, we're going to talk about the third of the Niyamas, which is one of my favorite, which is tapas. And it's about kind of austerities and bringing heat in order to purify. It's one of my favorites. It'll be a fun class. So we'll see you Monday night at 5:30 at Palm and Pine. See you then.